that she won't allow that to happen. But we'll see what the fight is when it gets going. But they have pushed.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are quaking in their boots as Prince William fires a new warning shot at them.
Kate Middleton makes a jaw-dropping entrance at a state dinner, rocking the biggest tiara she's ever worn.
It was exactly 7:48 in the morning when something unheard of happened inside royal walls. Prince William, yes, William himself, did something no one ever imagined he'd do. He signed his name under a statement so blunt, so final, that even the people who've spent their entire lives around the royal family had to pause, read it twice, and whisper, "Did he really just say that?" 19 words, that's all it took. 19 words to shut a door that had been half open for years. There will be no pathway for return. Those were the words. Final, cold, absolute. And this time, it wasn't some carefully worded line from a palace aide hiding behind protocol. No, this was William, the future king, speaking in his own unmistakable voice. The moment it dropped, the air around Buckingham Palace changed. Reporters froze mid-sentence, phones started buzzing, and before anyone could even refresh their feeds, BBC cut their live program to announce the news. Within 3 minutes, the world was watching. Within 15, over 200,000 shares had already spread those 19 words like wildfire. And the thing is, everyone could feel it. This wasn't just another statement. It was a door slamming shut, loud enough to echo all the way from London to California.
Prince Harry is attempting to bully King Charles into a meeting.
And speaking of California, there in the early darkness of dawn, Harry's phone lit up with a notification that would shatter something deep inside him. A part of him he probably didn't even know was still fragile. That alert carried his brother's words, his brother's voice, cutting through years of silence and distance. People started asking, what pushed William to this point? What made the man who spent years swallowing his words finally stand up and speak like this? Not in codes, not in careful PR phrases, but in a way no one could twist or misinterpret. The truth? It wasn't one single moment. It was a buildup. Months, years, layers of pressure, frustration, and betrayal, all boiling quietly until it finally spilled over. The day that happened, the world didn't just notice William's statement, it stopped for it.
And it marks the third tiara moment she's had in 2025. Most recently, the Princess of Wales sported.
BBC's anchor looked at the teleprompter, read it once, then again, and then, on live television, looked straight into the camera and whispered, "This is unprecedented." He didn't need to explain why. The disbelief in his tone said it all. Even Sky News scrambled, pulling together emergency panels. And when one former palace press secretary finally spoke, she said what everyone else was thinking. William doesn't speak unless the matter is beyond negotiation.
Listen, let me tell you what's really going on in Buckingham Palace. Meghan Markle really had it coming. You ever notice how—
This isn't a warning, she added. This isn't a boundary. This is final. Her voice trembled on the word final, heavy, loaded, permanent. Across the ocean, Americans woke up to phone screens flashing with breaking banners. Prince William confirms no return for Meghan Markle. CBS called it the most definitive royal statement in modern history. And yet, beyond the noise, beyond the hashtags and opinions, there was a quiet realization. Something massive had just changed forever. Outside Kensington Palace, reporters stood in the December cold, their breaths visible, whispering into cameras. This isn't speculation anymore. This is William himself confirming it. Meghan Markle will never return. That's never happened before. Not like this. Inside palace walls, staff moved like shadows, calm, efficient, but shaken. They'd known this was coming. They'd drafted it, redrafted it, whispered about it in corridors. But seeing it released, seeing William's signature under words that would reshape the monarchy, that was different. One aide described it later as watching history happen from the inside. This was William, not the prince people used to smiling politely at engagements, but a man who had reached his limit. He wasn't just defending the monarchy anymore, he was protecting his wife. Because behind this cold announcement was something deeply personal, something that began months earlier, in quiet November meetings and tense phone calls no one saw coming. It started when Catherine, who rarely complains, began noticing a strange pattern. Every time she'd launch something meaningful, a project for children, a charity initiative, a heartfelt speech, within 2 days, like clockwork, ugly stories would appear online. 10 times in 3 months, all with the same tone, all attacking her work, her relationships, her character, and none with any real sources, just that vague phrase, a palace insider. Finally, she'd had enough. One evening at Kensington Palace, she sat across from William, her notes spread out like evidence, and said quietly, "This isn't random, this is coordinated." That's when William's expression changed, cold, focused, determined. Because Catherine doesn't dramatize. If she says something is real, it's real. He started connecting the dots. And then came the briefing, the one that changed everything. Royal security had been tracking online activity. They'd found coordinated digital attacks aimed specifically at Catherine, patterns traced back to Process X accounts. The data didn't lie. When William heard that, his jaw clenched. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was organized hostility against the woman he loved, against the future queen. That moment broke something in him. He realized this wasn't about misunderstandings anymore. It was warfare in whispers, fought through headlines and hashtags. Meanwhile, across the palace, King Charles was quietly unraveling under the weight of it all. October 2024. He'd only recently settled into his reign, still mourning his mother, still adjusting, when the Sussex drama began draining his every hour. Briefings, rumors, fires to put out, week after week. And behind closed doors, he confessed to an aide, "I feel trapped between my love for Harry and my duty to the crown." Imagine that, a father torn between blood and crown. But the institution doesn't pause for heartbreak. The world expects stability, composure, unity. And none of that was possible while the Sussex storm kept spinning. Anne, ever the realist, had been warning him for months. You cannot protect everyone. At some point, the family stops being the solution and becomes the problem. By November, those words started echoing in William's head. Meetings were turning into firefights. Staff were exhausted. Every major royal announcement was overshadowed by the next Sussex controversy. The monarchy was bleeding credibility. And William, watching all this unfold, finally realized hope wasn't fixing anything. It was just delaying the inevitable. He had to choose between family and the future, between reconciliation and responsibility. And on a dark, cold night at Windsor Castle, he did. Part 2. The fire crackled quietly inside the private study. The air was thick, heavy. Charles entered first, eyes tired, his face drawn with sadness. Anne followed, sharp and unwavering. Then Catherine, quiet but resolute. William was already there, a single folder on the table. Inside, the statement. "This must be final," William said simply. No softening, no rewording later. Charles looked at him with a kind of weary heartbreak. "Father, that door isn't a door anymore. It's a weapon." Anne nodded. "You taught him to lead, Charles. That's exactly what he's doing." Catherine looked at the paper, her hand resting lightly on it. "It's not cruel," she said softly. "It's clear. It's time." When Charles finally whispered, "You have my support," the silence that followed felt eternal. The next morning, 7:48 a.m. sharp, the statement went live, and across oceans, history shifted. Harry, in the early California dark, blinked at his phone. The glow of the screen illuminated a face that had once smiled beside his brother. He didn't wake Meghan. He just sat there, reading the words again and again until they blurred. When he finally showed her, Meghan stared at the screen in silence. She'd prepared herself for many things, but not for this kind of finality, not for the sound of a door locking forever. Meanwhile, in London, Catherine carried on with her duties, her usual grace, her quiet poise. But those who knew her noticed something subtle. Her shoulders seemed lighter. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, waiting for another hit piece, another attack. The uncertainty was gone. Anne, when asked by a reporter, simply smiled and said, "The statement speaks for itself." And Charles, well, he retreated into private meetings, his sadness visible, but his acceptance unspoken. The media exploded, of course. Headlines screamed. Some called William brave, others called him heartless. But beneath it all, everyone knew. The ambiguity was over. The crown had chosen its path. For Meghan, everything changed overnight. Without royal ties, every partnership, every project, every public appearance now had to stand on its own. No royal backing, no subtle affiliation. Just her, alone. But maybe that's what she wanted all along, complete freedom. Freedom from the system she once hoped to transform. Because that's the truth behind all this drama. Meghan wanted to modernize an ancient institution. She believed she could rewrite its rules. But the monarchy wasn't built to bend, it's built to endure. And William? He's the embodiment of that endurance. The protector. The heir who finally drew a line. He didn't do it out of cruelty. He did it because endless hope was tearing everyone apart. Because sometimes leadership means choosing clarity over comfort, truth over tolerance, peace over perpetual noise. So as the world read those 19 words, there will be no pathway for return. One chapter closed forever. No more maybe someday. No more whispered reconciliation dreams. The story had its ending, and William himself had written it. And maybe that's what real leadership looks like. Not the fairy tale version, but the one where someone finally stops waiting for what will never return and decides to protect what still remains. Because at 7:48 a.m. that December morning, a prince didn't just speak. He became the future king. And maybe that's the part nobody truly saw coming. That William's silence was never weakness. It was calculation. For years, he had chosen patience, chosen to believe that time would soften the sharp edges of betrayal. But patience, in the face of constant humiliation, becomes poison. Every cruel article, every whisper undermining Catherine, every time his children's names were dragged into online mockery, it all carved deeper into him, until there was nothing left to carve. When he finally spoke, he wasn't just protecting his family. He was protecting his legacy, the future of the crown he's destined to lead. And that's what people miss when they call him cold. William didn't draw that line because he stopped loving his brother. He did it because he couldn't love his family and the monarchy properly when one was destroying the other. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Meghan must have felt the weight of those words like a tidal wave. Imagine sitting there, watching your name trend not because of your work or charity, but because a future king just declared your story over, publicly. No amount of PR strategy could spin that into victory. It wasn't a scandal, it was closure. And yet, there's something quietly powerful in that too. Because now, without the crown shadow, Meghan is free to be exactly who she wants. Unfiltered, unrestricted, unstoppable. But freedom always comes with a price. Back in London, William didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't boast. He just carried on. Because that's what kings in waitings do. They bleed privately so the institution doesn't crumble publicly. And at 7:48 that morning, when the world held its breath, William didn't just make history. He ended an era that refused to end itself.